All right, Alexander, let's talk about Germany and the farmers' strike. Uh, we've we could talk about Olaf Scholz's his dismal approval ratings. They seem to get lower with each passing week, and now he's got this farmers' strike. While at the same time, he is calling on Germany to spend more money on Ukraine. So go figure. And then we have trouble in France as well. The prime minister has resigned, and there's going to be a reshuffle in the Macron cabinet. So the situation in Europe is not going well at all. Where should we begin? Germany or France?
Well, let's start with France, because the most interesting thing is that we now have statements from the French finance minister saying that the situation is becoming increasingly bleak and that France might have to look forward to a period of austerity. So this decision to basically sack the prime minister, because of course she resigned, but it was quite clear that Macron wanted her out, that Macron has lost confidence in her, is a sign that, again, things economically are not going well in France, and that Macron's own position is becoming more brittle. And what he's now trying to do is he's trying to find some means to strengthen his government, because he senses that the whole thing is now slipping slowly. Power is slipping away from him. He's finding it increasingly difficult to govern France. One senses that his popularity there is falling, and the economic situation, as I said, is bad. But you talked about Scholz, more money for Ukraine. Macron is going to supply Ukraine with 85 more Scalp missiles, the French equivalent of the Storm Shadow. So you can see that even as in France, Macron understands that things are not going well, he won't take any step he won't take any overt step, any public step to break with the European consensus, the EU consensus. And instead, he's going to press on and continue the policy. He's just rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic as the ship crashes into the iceberg, because that's exactly what this new government reshuffle is all about.
Which is no different than the rumors from Bild about swapping out Schultz for the defense minister Pistorius.
Exactly.
It's pretty much the same thing that we're seeing.
It is exactly the same, and you can understand why they're talking about this, because, as you absolutely rightly say, Scholz's popularity is crashing. I mean, it's falling all the time. There's a massive loss of support. We have the farmers now protesting in Berlin. There's farmers' protests spreading to the Netherlands. Bear in mind, the farmers in Poland have been protesting for a very long time now, but all of this is now starting to come together. There's reports of shortages starting to emerge in German supermarkets. There's a budgetary crisis in Germany as well. But what you do, you swap Scholz for somebody who's even more hardline and is even more determined to stick with the EU consensus on Ukraine. What they're basically trying to do is they're trying to keep the Ukraine project afloat, and they are they're jettisoning ballast. Scholz, the French Prime Minister, people like that, just to keep the thing floating, and that's the entirety of European policy at this particular time. The dumping of the French government, the potential, in fact, likely dumping of Olaf Scholz, is that it is jettisoning ballast. It is nothing more. There is no real change of direction. Charles Michel is also going, notice, but he's going to cling on for a few more months. You can't allow Orban to take over leadership of the European Council, not for the next couple of months. So Charles Michel can see that this isn't working, so he's going to run simultaneously for the European Parliament whilst remaining president of the European Council. clear conflict of interest there, by the way, clear division of responsibilities. How can he do two things like that at one and the same time? But that's what he intends to do. But he's not going to resign now. He's going to cling on, keep Orban out, and then, of course, he's gone. And he's safe in the European Parliament. He's elected there. And when things really begin to turn ugly, well, he's no longer going to be there at the presidency of the European Council to be politically targeted as he might otherwise have been. But it's all political games, none of this addressing the underlying problems. And you see this now all across Europe, a determination to keep this Project Ukraine, going, despite growing economic problems, growing political unrest across Europe, bringing in even more hardline figures to replace the less successful previous hardline figures. Boris Pistorius, quite plausibly the French foreign minister, the man who said that France's objective when they supported the sanctions, this is what he said back in March, is to smash the entire Russian economy. I mean, he's a very hardline figure, but it's likely that he will be brought in. It's quite plausible that he might be the next prime minister of France. So you bring hardliners in, you dump the others, but you keep Project Ukraine alive.
Yeah. In the case of Germany, it's really interesting that Olaf Scholz, he must realize that he's on the way out. He sees that there's this huge farmers' protest. He sees that his country's a complete mess. It's being deindustrialized. It is deindustrialized. Businesses are closing down. But he has no problem. While all of this is going on, he has no problem urging Germans and the entirety of the EU to pour more money into Project Ukraine. It really tells you a lot about the interchangeability of these EU leaders and how you can swap one guy out for another guy, and the person that has just been replaced almost seems to have an understanding, perhaps an agreement of sorts, that if he just lays low for a couple of months, they'll find another position to place this person at. That was formerly the Chancellor of Germany. Sit tight, don't worry, we'll take care of you, but just no matter what, stay on track with Project Ukraine.
That's exactly correct.
I mean, you would think you would think if this person was any normal person would not be sitting there saying give money to Ukraine while there's a farmers' protest going on in his own country.
No, of course not. It doesn't. It doesn't compute. But I'm going to make a guess. I think that Olaf Scholz is clever enough to understand perfectly well that his position politically is becoming untenable. And what he's probably doing at the moment is he's negotiating the terms of his exit. So that's what he's probably actually doing at the moment in Germany now. And in order to negotiate good terms for his exit, he needs to reassure the people that he is negotiating with, that he remains completely loyal to them over Project Ukraine. So that's why he's coming out and making these statements at the moment. So that when he goes, he's not going to be subjected to too many investigations about the wire card scandal and other problems in Hamburg. And there's a nice job for him. Maybe when Charles Michel goes, who knows? Maybe president of the European Council. There's a nice vacancy opening up there. Maybe that is why Charles Michel is going. Just saying. Actually, I don't think so. I think the French would not want a German at the presidency of the European Council at this time. But, I'm just saying. You can see all the various.
They'll find somewhere for him.
They'll find somewhere for him. Yeah.
Yeah, they'll find somewhere for him. Real quick, how are things in Germany to wrap up the video? The German economy.
It's bad. I mean, we have more. The economy continues to contract. processes of deindustrialization are intensifying, and there continues to be a budgetary crisis. More talks now about tax increases, which this is not what Germany needs at this particular time, and even starting to have some complaints from people like Christian Lindner, who's the finance minister, that half of EU money that goes to Ukraine comes from Germany. Therefore, we know we're not going to scale back on money for Ukraine, but other European countries must start to contribute even more to this project, because if Germany's doing all this heavy lifting, then the others should start doing it also. So it's a bad situation in Germany. It's a bad situation in France. You'd struggle to find anywhere in Europe where things are really getting better. I mean, pretense that things are getting better in Italy and Greece. Nobody, I think, who lives in these countries really thinks that. But you can pretend that, but that's the fiction. In Northern Europe, it is impossible any longer. In Germany, in the Netherlands, in France, it's impossible to go on pretending this. So the situation deteriorates. Europe is trapped in a stagnation crisis. It turns out that the gas from Russia didn't just provide Germany with stable and low prices for gas. They also was essential for sustaining Germany's chemical industry, which is by far the biggest in Europe and one of the biggest in the world. And that whole chemical industry is gradually starting to implode on itself because it doesn't have the cheap gas from Russia that it depended upon.
The smart leaders in the EU are going to be the ones that get out now. Find another job, find another position. The lucky and the smart ones are going to be the ones that are removed now before the collapse. Absolutely. You don't want to be sitting in that seat when everything goes bust.
No, absolutely not. But, full steam ahead. You mustn't look back. Ukraine remains this. It's all about values, of course. We must continue to support Ukraine. We can't pull back now. We've got to keep this Operation Ukraine going. And, anybody who dares to speak out of turn on this, Viktor Orban, Robert Fico, people of that kind, you freeze them out of decision making to the extent that you can. And you see how Charles Michel is doing precisely that. He's going to simultaneously run for the European Parliament and remain president of the European Council, simply to stop Orban from taking charge.
Oh boy, they bet everything on Project Ukraine. They bet it all on Project Ukraine.
Yeah,
and without the US, the EU can't do anything.
Absolutely. But I will qualify that with one thing. You're absolutely right. I mean, Project Ukraine has been an absolute appalling disaster. But with the EU as it is set up now, if it had not been Project Ukraine, it would have been something else. I mean, the whole way in which the EU is structured now makes it absolutely all but certain that they would do something unsustainable and ridiculous and completely counterproductive to themselves. It just happens that Ukraine came along and was the one, and they listened to what Biden and Nuland and all of those people were saying. But at some point in 1 year's time, 2 years' time, 5 years' time, they would have done something else every bit as ridiculous and ill-conceived and stupid, and they would have persisted in it in exactly the same way.
Yeah. All right, we will leave it there. The Duran.locals.com. We are on Rumble, ODYSEE, BitChute, Telegram, Rockfin, and Twitter X. And go to the Duran shop, 15% off all t-shirts. Take care.